Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report on a Saturday. We're working through the weekend here because we got to play catch up with the draft ahead of Wednesday's first round. And yes, it is Wednesday. It is 4 days away when all the action is going to get started. There, of course, is one more NBA Finals game, but we got a lot of catching up to do with the draft here. And luckily, we have great resources like Stephen Gillaspie here from No Ceilings. Appreciate you being here, Stephen. Appreciate you bringing some prospects to the table that the Celtics could potentially look at number 28 and number 32.
Yeah, Bobby, thanks for having me, man. Once I found out that it was a possibility I could be on the show today, I was more than thrilled. It's been awesome just getting to talk to you throughout the day in preparation for the show. But yeah, this draft is a lot of fun, and I like the Celtics a lot, so this should be a fun time trying to help rebuild this team a little bit with all that's been going on recently.
Yeah, so the theme I put here, and honestly, I'm just asking a lot of draft experts, guys they like, fit it in Boston, all that sort of stuff. But I want to focus a little bit on what the Celtics need right now, because I think it is an interesting discussion. They've never had a ton of wing depth behind Jason Tatum and Jason Brown. Now, obviously, you're going to go into a year with Jason Tatum out for probably most, if not all, of the season. So that suddenly becomes a need. Center, you got a couple of free agents. Kristaps Porzingis' future uncertain. And then the backcourt, you're probably going to lose one of those guys, I'd imagine, as well. So you could honestly look at any three of those positions and call it a need for them. And I'd probably say guard, just looking at guys they've worked out, is where they're looking at in terms of their needs into the future, especially a development guy in that spot, or maybe someone a little ready to go. So that's probably out of those three the direction I would go in if I had to say what's their biggest need here. But you can't go wrong with the other two either. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I really don't think there is a wrong way to go either. I'm kind of like you, Bobby. I just think that you kind of go with whoever the better talent is that you assess,
Best
right?
available?
Yeah, your best available, a little bit of BPA, right? You can never go wrong with BPA, especially if you're looking to bolster a rotation that you might be shipping some assets away and losing your superstar for the foreseeable future. You know, get some clear-cut talent in there. That'd probably be the way to go.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to look at a number of prospects here, and we'll just go right down the line with a couple of the guys that you sent me here. And luckily, some of them are new names that we haven't discussed here on the podcast yet. And you wanted to start with Rasheer Fleming. So what are you thinking in terms of his game and his fit in Boston?
Yeah, so he's interesting because I have him significantly higher on my board. I have him 12th on my board, but a lot of the intel and stuff that we're gathering at No Ceilings is that he could fall a heck of a lot farther than where a lot of us at No Ceilings like him. And it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility that he's available for y'all at 28. Now, he played at St. Joseph. He's kind of a combo forward big man, measured in at 6'8.25" without shoes. So you're looking at a guy who's roughly, depending on the type of shoes he wears, he could be up to 6'10", 21 years old. So that's going to ding his stock a little bit. Outside of, I'd say, the lottery, any age is really within the realm of possibility, though. What stands out most when you look at him physically is that he has a 7'5.25" wingspan, which is silly. Like, he's just built to be a tough, hard-nosed defender. And he has been like a scrappy rebounder, a solid screen setter, and a play finisher for a long time in college. But what really stood out this year, Bobby, was that he shot 39% from deep. So adding that, being able to play defense, I think that he would fit the Boston Celtics a little bit. Now, the biggest questions with his game come with the playmaking and the ability to pass. So that could be a little bit of a hindrance, but I think just the talent overall is going to be overwhelmingly positive. I think that he could do something sort of like what we saw or what we have seen Obi Toppin do in these playoffs. And I think adding a floor spacing 3-and-D type kind of combo forward, maybe even give you some small ball 5 minutes, I think that would be a little too much to pass up. I mean, if you look, he shot 43% on his 58 open three-point attempts this year. And he also shot almost 37% on 101 guarded three-point attempts. So you like to think that that three-point shooting is going to translate. He's a terrific rebounder, offensive and defensive side. He moves well in transition. He cuts off of the ball. He will hustle and get those putback positions, and he is ranked in the 71st percentile as the roll man. I just think that, the coaching staff in Boston would love to have kind of a gadget guy like this to be able to insert into their rotation.
Yeah, and they do love screen setters, which I think is a skill that they'll look at, guys that can, create matchups for other guys and slip, like you said. I think that's a nice additional skill to have alongside some of the shooting there. And I think when you look at some of the other guys in this class, like at that wing spot, like we've looked at like a Drake Powell, there's some offensive questions there. Adu Thero, like there's major questions with his shot there. So I like the idea of a guy coming in with a shot that's a little more of a known commodity and not just a hope that that's going to come around, because I don't know, I feel like a lot of times these prospects, guys that come in with a very uncertain jump shot, it doesn't always turn out for the best, even though you hope it will.
For sure. I mean, how many times have we talked about prospects over the past few years, and he could rebound. He's a high energy guy. He'll play defense, but if he could only shoot it, he would just be awesome. And then we swing on these guys, and ultimately they can't get that together. That's why I'm so confident in my guy Rasheer, because it took a lot of really hard looks. I mean, at St. Joseph, he was the man. Like, there was a little bit of talent on that team, but it was Rasheer's team. And he took open, he took contested, he took movement threes. He's really ready to go. I mean, 6'8", 233 pounds. He's built for the NBA already. And I think that if I'm Boston and I'm looking to maybe still compete with the current roster that I have right now, adding a player like him who can physically handle a game checks a lot of boxes. He can defend, which is a big thing for Boston, checks even more boxes. And then he can space the floor. I mean, we all know that Boston is a real three-point heavy offense, and I think that he could fit in well with that.
So the shot, as we mentioned, that it was at 30% his freshman year, goes up to 32 the second year, and then you get that leap to 39 this year. Free throw for his career, 68, which is probably a little below where you want to see that. How real do you think was the shooting leap this third year, given that the first 2 years were closer to 30?
See, that's where you could kind of get into a little bit of conversation back and forth. I mean, if you remember Kobe Brown, who was drafted by the Clippers,
I liked him that year.
Liked him a lot, but he had that big, aberration in 3-point percentage whenever he was in his final year of college at Missouri, as opposed to what we saw from Rasheer. What makes me feel confident is that Rasheer didn't just grow into a 3-point shooter because he had no more college left. He could have gone back and played more college ball. So I'm more confident in the fact that he trusts in that shot a lot more. The coaching staff at St. Joseph trusts in that shot a lot more. I'm going to lean into the guy who has, by all accounts, character stuff checks out really, really well. I buy into it. I'm really high on him. Like I said, I have him 12th. Our guy Corey Tulaba at No Ceilings does these, average rankings across, reputable draft outlets. A lot of people have him 20th, so you're not going to hear me say a whole lot of negative things about him. If I wasn't confident in the shot, though, I will tell you that I'd have him significantly lower on my board.
So we were talking before we got on here. You've been doing this for 4 or 5 years now. Just based off what I've garnered about this class so far and the mock drafts I'm looking at and everybody's rankings, this class to me seems, and tell me if I'm wrong, to have the widest array of thoughts about the same prospects, where these guys are fitting in terms of their rankings. There's just a wide variety of the way people view the same players in this class and where everybody could go. I feel like more than I've ever seen before.
Yeah, I think that it's, I try not to get stuck in like everything that we see the first time or that we see recently is the first time that we've ever seen it. I will say that last year was pretty crazy just in the fact that there was no consensus. So whatever you thought was real, you just kind of went with your gut. There was a wide range of opinion within that class, even just last year. But what I will agree with you about, especially for the number one pick, I mean, Donovan Clingan, Zachary Risache, Alex Sarr, my guy, Steph Castle, who I was really high on, Reed Shepard. I mean, that's a handful of guys that could have gone number one, depending on who you asked, right? This class, I think, is more consensus heavy on the top, But once you start getting outside of like 14, 15, that's where you start seeing like the divergence in consensus around that range. So it is crazy to see how we can all just unanimously agree, like, hey, Cooper Flag is awesome. We're done talking about him. Let's find someone more controversial to talk about, right? It's crazy how we could be so consensus heavy on the top. But like I said, once you start getting outside the lottery, then that's where everyone is really starting to shoot their shot this year.
Yeah, so let's move on to the next player on your list here, which is, I think I just lost it. It is Ryan Kalkbrenner. Should we go with him?
Yeah.
We've talked about him a little bit already. Yeah, we'll go with him. And I'm a fan because I feel like everybody I've talked to has had him connected to the Celtics in some way. Now, again, we get into some of the variation of people's opinions here. The last guy I had on the pod here, Rafael Barlow, isn't as big of a fan as him, more into Maxime Reynaud, who other people I've talked to said his defense isn't going to translate to this level. And with Kalkbrenner, you get this great defensive prospect in college who's playing the drop and playing back at the rim and one of the best rim protectors in the country, this huge body. But I always wonder how that's going to translate to the NBA, because I think you are seeing more drop than since I've been watching in the NBA as the center of defenses. And it's definitely the Celtics base look for most of their lineups. But you do have to switch a little bit. You are going to get put in some actions if you're a center. And I think for Kalkbrenner, it's whether his speed is going to catch up to the next level. But we have seen some slower footed centers positionally be able to play well in that role.
Yeah, I mean, look at just last year when Zach Edey was drafted where he was. I mean, that was like the most polarizing big man that I can remember in a while, just because a lot of people were just like, the NBA is just built on oddities, right? And Zach Edey was exactly that. So let's lean into him. And then there was other people, I'll raise my hand, that were like, I don't know if the foot speed's going to work. Like, is he going to be quick enough to defend? And then he goes to Memphis, and he was able to do really, really well within his first year. I think, though, that for Kalkbrenner, the questions about foot speed, I think, are apt. And I'll go ahead and tell you now, I'm high on him this year, but essentially every other year, like, I couldn't stand him as a prospect. The running joke for me at No Ceilings was throughout the year, I'd be like, I hate how much I love Ryan Kalkbrenner this year because of how I felt about him previously. And what
so
really
he took
made
a real
him,
leap this year for you?
He really did. And the basis behind that leap, Bobby, isn't the fact that, he's a fast center, but what do we see? What has the NBA told us that they value with big men is that the offense has to be able to flow through them. You can't simply just be a play finisher. You have to have the ability to extend the play along. And with Ryan this year, he was standing outside the perimeter, dribbling the basketball, something that like we rarely ever saw from him at Creighton. He was taking 3-point shots. It might have taken him a while to get the shot off sometimes, but he would shoot, and the shot would go in at a respectable clip, like better than some of these other center prospects in this year's draft class that were pretty high on, thinking that they can shoot. Like Ryan actually has a little substance behind the fact that he took and made 3-pointers this year. So with the long story of him just always being a defensive menace on the court, like that was a real thing, something that we have always known that he was going to be able to do at a high level is defend. He got stronger. He consistently rebounded more, which is something that I criticized him for about 2-3 seasons ago, is that he's not mean or nasty enough. He got meaner and nastier. And now this year, being able to dribble along the perimeter and shoot, like he's modernized his offense. So I think that once you start getting into the range of where Boston is picking this year, like why not get the guy who has shown growth while also being a known commodity on the defensive end?
Yeah, and when I look at the reported workouts for Boston, you haven't seen a ton of centers through. I know he hasn't been through Boston yet. Last I heard, he was doing like a West Coast swing of workouts out there with some of those teams, and Atlanta's into him. They have 22. Sacramento, who I think only has a second-round pick, was into him as well through this course of workouts here. So, I don't really know how the workout thing goes in terms of like if a guy doesn't work out for a team, does that mean they're not necessarily going to take him here? But center's a need. Yeah. There's definitely a group of centers who will probably be available around this range. Reynaud certainly probably in the 20s, depending on who you ask. And, we'll see what Episorber there in the foot. I'm interested in that. So there's some guys I like at that position. In terms of all the centers in the class here, where does Kalkbrenner rank for you?
So I would have Derek Queen as my top center, followed by Kaman Malawatch, very closely followed by Thomas Sorber. And then I would have, again, depending on what you classify as a center, that's where I would have Wright Kalkbrenner. I have him ahead of Maxime. I have Maxime in like the early to mid 30s range on my board. I get the idea of him potentially kind of coming in and doing a little bit of what Kristaps Porzingis can do, like shoot from deep. But if you look at the 3-point percentage between he and Kalkbrenner, like you would think that Kalkbrenner was also being talked about as a potential 3-point shooter as well, because their efficiency is pretty close. Now, granted, I know that Maxime takes more of them, what have you, but if you look at percentages, like they're oddly close.
The Kalkbrenner shooting is going to be a real swing stat for him for sure. Like if those are going in along with everything else he's doing, he's going to be a great player, maybe even a starter in this league for sure. And you've seen it go from no attempts the freshman year to 0.4, 0.6, and then you're getting up over 1 attempt a game the last 2 years for him. First year it was 29%. This year you get to 34 if you're him. And then 70 free throw, probably could be a little higher, but decent enough, I think, to project towards some shooting for him. And I like the look of the shot. Like it's very confident. He'll get left out above the break and just turn and pull right up from out there. So it's a little slow. But I don't think teams are going to be sprinting him off the line necessarily either. So if he's getting left alone out there and some pick and pops and taking 1 or 2 a game, it's just a nice cherry on top of everything else he's going to bring to you. So I really like this prospect. The finishing's great. There's not a super advanced post game, it looks like, with him, but I like bigs rolling and facing up and doing some of that stuff more anyway. And he really did get downhill more explosively than you would have thought off the dribble in some situations.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Maxime Renault has gotten a lot of Quentin Post type comparisons. Like, in all honesty, and I was a super big Quentin Post guy last season. I loved him. Got to interview him. Got to know him a little bit. Very, very talented man. And I think
he end
Ryan's
up in the 50s.
Beats me because I wasn't in a general manager's position, I would say. It blew my mind because he could rebound, he could defend, he's shown that he can space the floor, he could pass. Like he literally showed that he could do everything that you would want from a modern big man in the NBA. And I think that that's what we saw from Ryan this year. And if it makes anyone feel better about like the foot speed concerns, like per our friends over at Synergy, he ranked in the 99th percentile in transition, which is crazy to say, but that's what the numbers tell us over at Synergy, right? So he's not as much of a plodding dinosaur as what everyone says that he is. I'm not sitting here telling you he's going to be, Miles Turner or anything like that, but he's not as like concrete center block footed as a lot of people make him out to be.
What's the likelihood you think he'll be available at 28?
I think that there's a likelihood. I'd be sitting here lying to you if I told you that there's not other people that like him as much, if not a little bit more than me. I believe Matt Powers, you had on the show not too long ago. He has him higher than I do, which I applaud. But I think that there are enough people within the draft community, like the draft Twitter community, that like him. But NBA teams are funny about such things, right? Like some teams might value someone who has a longer developmental curve,
The age thing seems to get NBA people more than anything else. You look at a 23-year-old who played 5 years of college and just look to last year with Baylor Shireman, who I did not expect to be there at 30, who was my favorite option for Boston out of everybody I looked at. And I think they were surprised he was there at 32, but he's a guy who played 5 years and came in at 22, 23. And for some reason that knocks you down quite a bit in the NBA drafts, even though we've seen great players play 3-4 years of college and then thrive at the next level. I mean, Jalen Brunson played 3 years, I want to say.
Yep.
So,
if you look at
stardom.
Yeah, but I don't think that what happened with Dalton Connect is really going to do the older guys a lot of favors too, who he was drafted within that top 10 range and was an older prospect. I think people would look at a Dalton Connect and kind of be like, see, this is why we don't do this. Look, guys, look at this, but for every success, there's another player that you can point to as a cautionary tale. I just think that when you get to late first round, like I like Neat Clifford, who's an older prospect too. I have him 10th on my big board. A lot of NBA teams would call me crazy, but to me, like at some point, you got to say talent is talent regardless of the age, you know?
Yeah, so I like Kalkbrenner. We keep talking about him, and I think there's some real reason for that. It's a fit, it's a need. It's definitely something that, especially if the Celtics lose Luke Cornett, they're going to need that kind of skill set on this roster. And how ready will he be to go right away? Because obviously Cornett, got a similar prospect for sure, needed some time in the G League, needed a lot of time, frankly, to find where he was going to be role-wise by the end of his development curve there. So, there is still sometimes a need for some G League reps for some time up there. And that's what the Celtics have done pretty consistently. Talking to some of the other draft guys too, I think what's interesting is maybe agents angling guys toward teams where they're not going to have to go to the G League, where they're not going to have to sit down for a year. Maybe guys want to play right away in this class in particular. So I think that's going to be interesting with Boston too, because at least last 2 years, they are a team that has not had minutes available for the younger guys. They haven't picked in the first round up until last year over the last, Brad Stevens stretch here. But this year's in flux. Like, I don't think anyone knows who's going to be on this roster. I don't think anyone knows what this team's trajectory is going to be this year. So this is a more important pick. This is definitely a more consequential pick potentially for them than we've seen throughout Stevens' tenure, because these are going to be the key decisions that I think keep a team like this sustainable.
Yeah, and for Ryan, I always want to give point guards and centers a little bit more runway to be able to prove themselves, because a lot of NBA people that I talk to will tell me that centers have never been asked to do more in the NBA, in the history of the NBA, than now, So Ryan is probably going to need a little bit of time to acclimate to the speed of the NBA, just like essentially
it's
every
crazy.
rookie is. Yeah, and especially like the sophistication of like a Boston style offense is going to be vastly different than what he ran at Creighton. So it will give him a little bit of time, but I think physically that's where it matters to me most. Like, I trust Ryan to be able to go out there and bang bodies with some NBA players than a lot of other big man talent within this class. Like, he's going to physically be able to handle the demands of the NBA, but it's going to be the adjustment and acclimation period to the concepts and to just the overall speed of the game that I think is going to require a little bit more time.
We're going to get into some other prospects here in just a second. I want to give a shout out first to Prize Picks, and there is one game left in the basketball playoffs here, and it's the championship series. Championship is on the line tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and with just one game left, that means time's running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks. The best place to cash in on your favorite sports in this year's basketball playoffs are headed toward crowning a first-time champ for the first time in more than 50 years. Don't miss your chance to cash in on history with Prize Picks. Pick more or less on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and more for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. And with baseball going on, esports, and much more, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite basketball players with players from other sports, and they also have the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect, especially on Flex Friday. You got Taco Tuesdays over there with discounts on player projections, usually by 15 to 25%, and free squares always available as well. They're always doing all kinds of great promos like that out there as well. So with one day left, I'd go check out whether you feel good about the Thunder's chances with Shea. You can go more on his scoring, or if Halliburton's performance last game inspired you playing through the injury, you can go more on his assist. Those have been the two things I've been looking at throughout this series. So go over there and download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get 50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get 50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And I'll also give a shout out to LinkedIn. As a small business owner, you don't have the luxury of clocking out early. Your business is on your mind 24/7. So when you're hiring, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That hiring partner is LinkedIn Jobs. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. And LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free. Share it with your network and get qualified candidates that you can manage all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. Either post your job for free or pay to promote, and promote jobs. Get 3 times more qualified candidates over on LinkedIn. And at the end of the day, the most important thing for your small business is the quality of candidates. And with LinkedIn, you can feel confident you're getting the best. 72% of small businesses using LinkedIn say that they help them find high quality candidates. You can let your network know you're hiring, even add a hiring frame to your profile picture and get twice the qualified candidates. So find out why more than 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today. Find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/garden. That's GARDEN. That's linkedin.com/garden to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So let's move on to Elijah Martin, the first of 2 Florida players we're going to talk about here.
I love Elijah Martin. You probably won't find a bigger fan of him than maybe his mom. Maybe. I'm telling you, I have him 28th on my board. It's not a popular opinion. What I will tell you is a popular opinion from talking to people that are close to him and that are in his camp is that there are a lot of teams that are in the 30s that really like him, especially a lot of Midwest teams. Now, why I think that he is an especially good fit with the Boston Celtics is that he is a player that will scrap like crazy on the defensive end. If I could compare him to somebody, he might not be the most popular player anymore, but Patrick Beverley was a problem in his prime on the defensive end. So imagine Patrick Beverley, but a little bit more buttoned up, measured in at 6'1.5" barefoot. So you're looking at about 6'3" on a basketball court, 209 pounds, a plus 6-inch wingspan, which really goes a long way if you're going to be a defensive menace like him. He had 29 dunks on the year, 9 of which in the half court. He tested at the combine better than a lot of people that you would expect, such as Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, a lot of people at the top of the draft. I mean, Elijah Martin is a problem as an athlete. He also shot better on side threes at the combine than Cooper Flagg, Cedric Coward, Ace Bailey, Kasparas Giannakis, Will Riley, and Cam Jones. For his size, he's an incredible rebounder, offensive rebound percentage of almost 5, and a defensive rebound percentage of almost 11. He has improved as a shooter year over year in college. This year, he averaged 35% on threes on 11 attempts per 100 possessions. You leave him open, he's going to knock down 38% of those. On the dribble, off of the bounce, he can hit about 36% of his threes. He's not the best ball handler as a point guard, which is why I have him lower. I'm accounting for him not being the most ball dominant guard, but he is a very good decision maker. He had an assist to turnover ratio of 1.5. He had a great steals percentage of 2.7. And if you want to contextualize how effective he was on the defensive end, defending some of the most athletic players within the SEC this year, he had 66 stocks, which are steals and blocks combined, to just 54 fouls committed. And that's as a 6'1" guard playing in the SEC, defending 2s, 3s, and 4s on a nightly basis, only having 54 fouls is crazy. So I think that if you look at what guards are doing in the playoffs this year, and even in the finals, the hustle, spacing the floor, playing defense, getting rebounds, diving all over the place, I genuinely feel like Elijah Martin can check all of those same boxes and be a contributor to a very winning team.
Yeah, so I wonder what the role would be without the plus creation ability, at that guard spot, along with maybe the size concerns for a guy like that. I know the Celtics have their wings running the show a lot of the time and some other potential facilitating guards in the mix, but if you don't see him necessarily as a point, what role does that project for a guy like this?
I think that he can handle the ball a lot more. If you looked at before he played at Florida Atlantic. And because he was so defensively talented and so athletic, Coach Dusty May, who was his coach at the time, now coaches at Michigan, had him play the 4. So he was really never ever put in a spot where he could be the lead guard. And then he commits to Florida. He knew he wanted to go to Florida. He entered the transfer portal with a do not contact tag. So he had it figured out where he wanted to go. He went to go play alongside another player that we're going to be talking about soon, and Walter Clayton Jr., who is best with the ball in his hand. So I like him, Elijah, because he's not going to rock the boat in a way that he's going to demand things away from other people so far as it equates to winning. And I think that Elijah going to Boston, the likelihood of being like the lead creator, like even in bench units, right? Like he's not going to be the lead ball handler. So what you can have him do though is guard the other team's ball handler, right? And you can, depending on who you got out there with him, right? Like if you got Peyton Pritchard out there with him, you probably don't want Peyton guarding the other best guard in the backcourt off of the bench. That's where Elijah could come in handy. He could take on that matchup. And then he can space the floor for Peyton to run pick and roll sets with anybody else, right? So we see sometimes these undersized guards like, Andrew Nemhard in the playoffs right now. He plays with Tyrese Halliburton. He is not running the show on the offensive end, right? So Pascal Siakam handles the ball a lot for that team. So I think that he could do kind of similar context within that regard. I'm not saying he can't handle the ball. Like some people will say, will hear what I'm saying, and I'm not saying he can't, but he's just not going to come into a team and be the primary option. Like he could be a good secondary, tertiary type of guy. He's just not going to be the lead guy on the team.
All right, let's take a look at a younger prospect here. A lot of these guys we've looked at so far have been on the older side, but Liam McNeeley coming in from UConn, one and done here, right?
Yep, one and done, played at Montverde with a lot of other guys that are going to be taken ahead of him in this year's draft. Yep.
So what's the story with him? Not super familiar with his game.
Yeah, so Liam McNeeley comes from Montverde, like I said, played with Asa Newell, played with Derek Queen, and the presumed number 1 pick in this year's draft, Cooper Flagg. Came into this season with a lot of hype. There was kind of a debate within the draft community of like, would you rather have him or Con Knipple? Some people might be hearing that now and be like, how would that ever have been a conversation? Well, it genuinely was preseason. And Liam being bigger than Con and shooting about 46% from deep at Montverde, like there was a lot of optimism for his game translating up. Now he went to UConn. Don't doubt the kid for wanting to go and play at UConn, considering what their recent history had been, back-to-back national championships very recently. He went there, and the point guard situation was iffy. They have a kid on their team by the name of Solo Ball, who is very much a three-point shooter, but not an organizer. Liam commits to go play with Coach Hurley and has the ball a lot in his hand, a much different role than what you could expect him to have had playing with Cooper Flagg and a Derek Queen on the same team. So the context is weird. For a shooting prospect, he only shot about 32% from deep. A lot of people might hear that and say, why on earth would I want to draft a shooter who can't shoot? But even in this down season, he shot 37% on catch and shoot looks. So when he's not handling the ball and when he's not leading a team and he's being a supplementary type player in the offensive end, then you can trust him to knock down these shots. And that's what I would imagine the visual would be if Boston were to get him kind of in the late first round.
Yeah, interesting that the shooting didn't quite translate to the first year there that you would have expected, though I see 37% on catch and shoot threes, which is probably going to be, if you're joining Boston, the primary where you're going to get a lot of those shots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I think when I think of, okay, if I'm going to drop somebody into Boston's offensive system, I think Liam McNeeley, like I said, even in a down year, even a year where his shot was kind of betrayed him a little bit overall, he still contributed off the ball. And that's what I think if you're envisioning him in a system, like it would be a Boston system where he's going to play off of these other primary initiators, these other primary scorers. And he showed that he can also put a lot of pressure on the rim. He had 12 and ones on the season, which was among, the best on his team. He had a free throw rate of 41, which isn't setting the world on fire. But if you contextualize this UConn system, he's showing that even on a bad team that he can attack the basket, he can still draw contact and get himself to the free throw line, where he shot about 87% on his free throws.
Yeah, and there's a mix of wings still on this team. Baylor Scheinman's probably going to get some more minutes next year, and Jordan Walsh, we'll see if they continue on with him. There's been a couple guys that they've tried to slot into that spot. We'll see if Sam Hauser remains after some of the offseason changes here. I would probably bet against that. So they're going to have to look at some sort of shooting wing here with one of these picks, I believe, when we think of needs on this roster. And there's definitely a lot of guys. I know they've worked out Chaz Lanier as well, who's one of the better shooters in this draft, and Kobe Bray is a name I've heard in that regard as well. So there's a number of guys that could potentially fill a Hauser-like role on this team. But again, when it comes to the development track, like we were talking with Kalkbrenner earlier, it took a while for Hauser to work up to the defensive level he reached that allowed him to play playoff minutes and all of that. And, for a 19, 20-year-old coming in here, I'd have to imagine there'll be some sort of development mental track that McNeeley will have to go through rather than jumping on the court and impacting them right away.
And what gives me some hope behind that is one, the frame. I mean, without shoes, he's standing at about 6'7". So he's got the tools that you could imagine him developing more on that defensive size, or that defensive side, excuse me. He did rebound well. He had an offensive rebound percentage of almost 4 and a defensive rebound percentage of 19. That's while also being, like I said, one of the primary initiators in a brand new role. So he shows that he can do a lot of the hustle stuff. He competes. He's like a dive on the floor type guy. If you're a coach speak type of fan as well, like he's the commitment guy, and him wanting to go to UConn is him showing, like, even though that this program might not have the same players, they're lacking their Donovan Clingan, right, or the Steph Castle on this team. I want to go somewhere where I can continue my upward trajectory and learn how to win. Now, the defense is going to be the area where I think that he's going to require a little bit more love, but I think that he can get to be like that neutral, maybe slightly higher than neutral type defender based on just what we've seen so far in his young career.
Yeah, for sure. And with some offensive skills, you might put him ahead of maybe a Drake Powell who, I don't know, didn't show the best offensive potential at UNC right away at the very least. But, it's tough to tell with the fit sometimes for these guys and where they played and for how short of a tenure they played on some of their teams, for the freshmen particularly. You just don't know how much that impacted certain guys along with other factors and what their production was that first year. Now, with this next guy, not a lot of questions about what he did at the college level. I mean, and we've seen it before, right? And I think of Peyton Pritchard here, who this guy, if you're drafting him, is probably going to step into Pritchard's role, with Pritchard becoming a starter on the Celtics if they move on from one of these guards. So that's why I really like the idea of Clayton to Boston, if he's still available there. And it feels like his stock's rising a little bit right now. Is, he's going to step into an on-ball creation role, getting his own shot and scoring that isn't really a question with him. And so if you slot him into that kind of role, he'll probably take it and run with it right away and won't need much time to warm up to that. Now, what's he going to be beyond that skill set? I don't necessarily know. But when we talk about need on this roster with just a few guards and needing someone who can play a little bit right away off the bench alongside Sharma and some of the other young guys, orchestrate things a little bit for himself and others, I really like the idea of Clayton coming in here, especially with his pedigree and what he's done at the college level. Now, not all of those guys have succeeded. Some of the stars of March Madness, I think of Carson Edwards in Boston. That didn't go so great. But I have a lot of faith in just this guy's mentality and the way he's played. It reminds me definitely more of Pritchard than Edwards, who just caught fire that one year.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a little story about Walter Clayton Jr. So a couple of seasons ago, back when Brandon Pajemski was playing at Santa Clara, I had a chance to interview Brandon and get to know him a little bit. And even during the interview, like, I knew of Walter Clayton Jr. back when he played for Coach Pitino at Iona. And I asked Brandon during the interview, like, this is how much I thought of Walter Clayton. Said, hey, what do you like about Walter Clayton Jr.? What's his game like? Because a lot of people in the draft community are starting to like him. And Brandon was super complimentary of him. He said that he gave him the most problems out of almost anybody that he played through the year at that point. And Brandon was rising into ascension, right, into being drafted by the Golden State Warriors, like, during that same year. So I never lost sight of the fact that Brandon Pajemski, who is now, on the Golden State Warriors, thought the world of Walter Clayton Jr. And then fast forward to him playing at Florida in his first year in the SEC, like, he still shot the ball very well and still had the ability to handle the contact. I was recently on a show and I was asked, who is a player that is not getting talked about this way but is underrated as an athlete? And as I was doing my research in preparation for the show, I kept coming to Walter Clayton Jr. A lot of people know that Walter Clayton Jr. is a shooter, right? But he's 6'2", barefoot, 200 pounds. He's built like these smaller guards that you see be successful in the NBA, Walter Clayton Jr. is built like that. Now he
And he
had a
made
higher
60% of his shots at the rim.
exactly right. He had a block percentage. This year was his lowest block percentage at 1.6, which is significantly better than what a lot of other guards are doing in college basketball. He had 64 stocks to 72 fouls committed, which is dang near neutral, right? For a guy who you look at and is like an offensive merchant, right? He still competes on the defensive end, and that's why I like him so much. And if you look at this, you mentioned that in the rim, he was at the 63rd percentile. He was in the 77th percentile as a ball handler. If you include passes, he was in the 74th. And he was in the 89th percentile on dribble jumpers, where he took 195 dribble jumper threes. So you talk about the
ridiculous.
but think about more than just the shooting. Think about the bend, the ability to navigate around the defense, to start, stop on a dime, the core strength to be able to pull up and contort your body, to be able to shoot over the top of defenders, Bobby. I mean, it's just incredible. I think the athleticism with him is really underrated. His max vert, I was talking about with Elijah Martin, like Walter Clayton was right there with them. Like they're very supremely athletic guard that only really gets talked about as a shooter. So when I think about the physical demands that he's going to have in the NBA, I think Walter Clayton Jr. could fit that. And what's crazy is because he is a 22-year-old guy in the draft, he legit could fall to this range because he's not a tall guard and he's a little bit older. He could find his way being here to Boston. I would have a hard time imagining that, but there are some people who genuinely believe that he will be around for Boston. So if I'm Boston and I'm looking for people who can come in and contribute really on both sides of the floor, I'm sprinting to the podium for Walter Clayton Jr.
I'm there too. So I'm with you on Kalkbrenner. I'm with you on Clayton. I think that wouldn't be a bad 28-32 combination if that's how it works out for Boston here. Now, in the event they move up, I did want to ask you about one other guy here who has been on their workout board, and that is Cedric Coward, who I believe is the highest rated guy that they have worked out, at least reportedly here. So if they are in position to draft a guy like that, which is tough to imagine. Now, who knows what's going to happen with some of these trades and what picks could come back in those. Maybe you end up moving way up the board here, but this is a guy who's probably going to be gone in the top 10 to 15, right?
Yeah, I have him 9th on my board. Like if I'm Boston and I have the ability to keep the majority of my core intact, but I'm looking to add a cost-controlled, perimeter player on the cheap, I have a hard time. Like you might not be able to create somebody in the lab who could do what Cedric Carter can do for this team. Now, his handle, I know that handles are a concern for some people. His handle isn't the most advanced, but if you look at every stop that Cedric Coward has been at through his college career, he has been an elite floor spacer, like elite, not good, elite. He's also been a very good post scorer too, which is, that might sound weird that someone would speak glowingly of a wing player who can score in the post. But the reason I value that is because it's showing that he's not afraid of contact. He can bully guys, like he will hunt a mismatch and punish it. And he's going to be physically ready for the NBA. And defensively, the tools are there. This guy has a 7'2" wingspan, and he's about 6'5", 6'6". That's insane. That's insane. So I think that if you could add a Cedric Coward to this team, he would be like a pipe dream. Like if I couldn't imagine a better, he will fit anywhere, but for Boston, he would just be an insane get for them.
Yeah, that reminds me of some of the guys Ainge would draft way back when, he was just buying in on some of the length and some of the versatility on the wing like that. Same kind of things that set them up with this Brown-Tatum tandem that they've rode to so much success here. I could see him going with if they had a higher pick here. So it'll be interesting to see whether the Celtics move up into a range where they're taking one of the higher ranked prospects in this draft class, which, again, I think there's a lot of mixed opinion on a lot of these guys. You'd have to really like someone, I think, to move up and, use assets to take someone who's higher ranked in this class. When it comes to the 20s, late 20s, early 30s, where they're going to be picking, though, there's a lot more uncertainty there. You don't know who's going to be there. You don't know how good those guys are going to be. So it's a really difficult spot to draft from. It was a good start, though, with Baylor Shireman. And I think by the end of last year, we started to see him go in a pretty good direction for them.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Baylor, you can't really hold the first year against them just because of what the aspirations and the depth of this team were. Baylor has a chance to do some very special things, but I mean, I could wax poetic on the prospects that have risen to success by being undrafted, being second round picks, let alone first round. But a lot of times, man, like Bobby, as you know, it's really just a matter of you're drafting a person, not just like a stat sheet
Yeah.
or an analytical profile. You're drafting a person, and that's not always easy to evaluate. I mean, look at the John Morant and Zion Williamson class. Like those are supposed to be slam dunks, and look at what each of those teams are going through respectively right now. So it's hard to just look at a player and Markelle Fultz, right? Like that's another cautionary tale. I mean, one of the best prospects that a lot of people have ever scouted, and is having a hard time finding a home a lot of times now, right? So it's hard. You never know. And then there's people, like I said, who get taken late in the first round who are success stories that we always ask ourselves, like, how in the world did they end up falling here? Sometimes it's strategic. Sometimes it's just being overlooked, or context or conference, whatever, right? Like there's a number of reasons why people can slide this far, but I'm of the mindset that you can always find talent. It's just how hard you want to work to get it.
Speaking of sliding, I did want to ask you as well, what's going on with this Ace Bailey situation that's developing here over the last handful of days?
So I'm sure that a lot of people have heard this. I'm probably not breaking any ground here, but the thing with him is that it's either one of two things. Like either he has a place in mind, or he's just getting really, really bad advice. And it's hard to nail down which one is which, because he's being represented by a person who doesn't really have a lot of clients in the NBA. He is being the agency is asking for money for even agency like appearances, like on shows and interviews and stuff like that. He's not working out for anybody, it's happened before, and it's happened with some really successful people. A lot of people have been bringing up Amari Stoudemire recently, who one of my favorite players of all time. So there are success stories of this happening, but it's just really hard because it feels like he's kind of being punished in a sense for his agency and how they're handling him, because everything that I've ever heard about him and us at No Ceilings have heard about him is that he's a fantastic kid. But then he's getting these like, well, he's 18, 19 years old, and this is just something that 18 and 19-year-olds do. I'm asking though, like, well, how come the other 18 and 19-year-olds in this class aren't doing the same thing at the same time? And it doesn't do him any favors either that he is having this stuff go on and he plays the way he does and he has the comments that he says. Like, if this guy hits, like, we have another Anthony Edwards on our hand where he is just going to be gold for the media of the team that he goes to. Like, he's going to be a very quotable guy. It's just hard to say, man. Like, I don't have him sixth on my board because of media stuff. Like, I have genuine concerns about the talent to some degree, but he has impacted his stock because of the things that have been going on. And there's even people that are in the know that either one can't talk a lot about it because of, just the way that things go in the media, as you know, Bobby, but two, it's just weird and it's hard to really nail down.
Yeah, it's a fascinating class. And, the more I talk to people about it, it feels like it could go down as being underrated. But it's just going to be where a lot of these guys land, a lot of the roles these guys are going to be asked to play, because I think there are a lot of unique situations for a lot of these guys in terms of their skill sets and how they'll adapt to certain teams. Like, every one of these guys, I think, is going to be highly dependent on where they end up, almost certainly. And, we'll see with Flag's upside ends up being there at the top, and Dylan Harper looks like he's going to be San Antonio there, which I think is a pretty good place for a guy like that to land. But a lot of uncertainty almost immediately after that right now. And thank you for stopping by and helping sort it out. Want to plug your work and where the people can find it?
Well, thank you so much, Bobby, for having me on, man. This was an absolute blast. For anybody who wants to follow No Ceilings. NoCeilingsNBA.com is kind of like the one-stop shop where you can get our draft guide, which we released. It's been well received. $15 if you could swing it. There's over 100 prospects worth of information on there, about 300 pages long, but it's not just text. Like, it's broken up. If you remember sports magazines and what they look like, this is going to give you a little bit of nostalgia on that front. Our editing team and our content team did a fantastic job of making this digestible and entertaining. So NoCeilingsNBA.com, there's a link there for our store where you can go and read about this class and educate yourself. We have a YouTube channel, which is like booming this year. It's been awesome to see. No Ceilings NBA. All of our handles, No Ceilings NBA. You can follow us. And if you want to follow little old me, you can do that too. I'm most active on Twitter /X, whatever people are calling it, at Stephen G Hoops. That's Stephen with the PH, the letter G, and then Hoops. And again, Bobby, man, like, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me on, brother.
Thank you for stopping by. It was great meeting you here. And I'm going to head right over and grab that draft guide right now because I'm playing catch up just like everybody else to see who the Celtics could take here. So it's going to be an interesting week. We're just 4 days away, so no better time to get started and learn about some of these guys. And they do a great job over there at No Ceilings. Obviously, Tyler,
thank you.
Stop by our colleague Noah's show as well, so you can go check out some of those and some of the other draft ones we've done. We got some more to come over the next couple of days here. And then round 1 of the NBA draft is on Wednesday night with the Celtics. For now, I'm going to pick 28th overall. So we will see you tomorrow with another show. Tomorrow night, we'll have that scheduled for, I believe, 7:30. And until then, thank you, Stephen. And we will talk to you then. Check out Prize Picks. Check out LinkedIn. Go over there. Use the code CLNS over on Prize Picks. And LinkedIn.com/Garden to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And that's it for us here on the Garden Report. Check out our interview with Drew Peterson this week and Torrey Craig out now as well. A lot of great stuff going on here on the channel. CLNS Media, Celtics All Access for all the Celtics coverage throughout the off season. And we will talk to you tomorrow. Peace.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you
Okay,
that.
you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to
Shane,
feel that
Shane,
way.
Steve.
Let's slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke